Well, good evening. Thank you so much for coming and joining us at our second Freedom Fighters in Gala. We're so excited. You were at the first one. We were just discussing backstage. She actually was at an event with us about 11 years ago, which was pretty amazing back then as well.
So, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and to Fredo, and to the Marcus family, Governor and Mrs. Kemp, of course. I see Alex Acosta, Governor Marcus, lots of friends and allies in the room. So, if it was 11 years ago, my kids would have been 9, 9, 6, and 4, which means coming to that speech was like a spa day. So thank you. No, seriously speaking, it's wonderful to be here. And may I just add my voice, my small little voice, to the chorus of voices in this room and all across this great nation, and certainly in this state that was so beloved to Bernie Marcus, to express to the Marcus family and everybody at JCN how much we love and honor and appreciate his legacy. And just watching that video, I'm reminded why we have to redouble our efforts for freedom, for free markets, for entrepreneurship, for innovation, for grit. One of his closest friends is one of my mentors, Ken Landone. And I always say, how did the two of you get hooked up with Arthur Blank? I said, Ken, Mr. Marcus is the most, sort of quiet, sensible, just tells you like it is, very patient. And one time somebody asked me to help Ken Landone with an interview, and every other word needs to be bleeped. So we can't even run the interview. So they're very different people, but what they were able to do and the way Mr. Marcus explained it in that video really just tells us in this country all things are possible.
Absolutely. We've had Ken at one of our events before too, and I've heard the bleeps several times. But let's get started. So I'm going to start with Trump 1.0 versus Trump 2.0. And the reason why is because you have had such a bird's eye seat. The first few months of the Trump administration have been markedly different. We've all noticed that from the first administration. Give us the 30,000-foot view and compare and contrast the two terms. And what's your takeaway and from your inside perspective?
Sure. Well, clearly President Trump knows the job better, having been in for 4 years. That's obvious. But I think the point that we don't talk enough about is what happened in the 4 years between the two Trump terms. And so when they arrived in Trump 2, they can actually point to chapter and verse, program by program, expenditure, just all the nonsense. The spending money we don't have on things we don't need and didn't quite ask for, and frankly don't align with our values from these last 4 years. So in some ways, it's been an easier task because when we got there in 2017, sure, we wanted to repeal and replace the ACA, Obamacare. We wanted to get infrastructure done. We wanted to get those Tax Cut and Jobs Act benefits passed earlier than they were signed into law in December, but it got done. We wanted to do all these things. But very few people were saying, gee, Obama did all of this in 8 years, you got to undo it right away. Very few people in the country, in other words. He left office in an okay place. Biden-Harris left office in disgrace. 72% of Americans on election day said the economy was off on the wrong track. Worse numbers even on the border, worse numbers on DEI and all that that meant. Worse numbers on small business formation, surviving and thriving. Worse numbers on Ukraine and Middle East than President Trump certainly has. So in some ways, he knows the job better, but he's able to go in there and keep campaign promises that are granular and specific issue by issue. But remember President Trump's overall prosecution of the case in 2024. He said, they broke it, I'll fix it. And the adjunct to that is, they neglected it, I'll tackle it, or they ignored it, I'll do it. And there was a lot of that underlying. The other thing is that President Trump knows he got hired because America has the same bias in hiring we all do, whether we realize it or not. We all have a bias in hiring. We want to hire people to do a job who have done the job before. We just like seeing that. That's why you lateral hire people. You look at their resumes, you call their references, you talk to people you trust who are familiar with their work ethic, their work product. And that the country said they can put aside many things to get the presidential performance they want, and many did. So when he said, I want to get us back to the pre-pandemic 2019 economy, when everyone in this room can appreciate low interest rates, low unemployment rates, a rising tide lifting most, if not all, boats, record wage growth among African American Hispanic households, younger households, veteran households, 71% of all new jobs in 2019 pre-COVID, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Alex Acosta, went to women. 71% of all those new jobs went to women. And the list went on and on. People really wanted that economy back, and they thought he could bring us there. But I think there's three big things that are different this time that really helped President Trump in the job beyond the obvious. One is America is just more aligned with the America First agenda. So it's May 1st, 2015. June 16th, in about 6 weeks, will be 10 years since Mr. Trump came down that escalator. 10 years. So around this time, 10 years ago, Donald J. Trump was already talking about illegal immigration and, to a lesser extent, border security. And what happened when he did? He was practically banned. Macy's canceled his golf shirt and tie contract, yippee-doo, and excuse me, he was met with international derision and ridicule and exclusion in many places. Fast forward to the election of 2024, and border security, which is a better way of explaining illegal immigration to some voters who are otherwise skeptical, border security is the number 2 issue nationwide in Netherlands polling and in the 7 swing states. So more of America has become more aligned with what is known as the America First agenda. And I can't overstate to you how important that is. When Mr. Trump was talking about illegal immigration and trade, when he's talking about both of those issues, China's eating our lunch, globalization has taken our jobs, something that my family knows well. Every man in my family to this moment, my cousins, my uncles, our extended family, those guys in South Jersey and Pennsylvania, go Birds, are all in, they are all in the private trades. That's what they do for a living. They're welders, they're carpenters, they're steel scrappers, they're iron workers. And they were always Democrats. They're very much Republicans now. But I say this because they told me, their cousin who went to college and law school, they told me years ago that they'd sit in the union halls waiting for work because the job they used to do is now in Mexico. It was a real thing decades ago. So people were ready. They kind of sort of knew it intuitively 10 years ago, but it wasn't until they started living it. And there's no better example I have for you on any of this than the border. So 10 years ago, with people saying you can't do that, we need a pathway, you're being so cruel, this is outrageous. Now people see it in their backyards. Every state is a border state. That's something we found in a survey we did for the RNC about 4 years ago. What did this mean in practical terms? It meant that the same people, including Hispanics and African Americans and young people and females and independents and Democrats who never voted for President Trump, Democrats who never voted Republican, some who never voted before at all. Some voters never voted before at all. They said it's not fair that you're letting 10 million people that we know of here illegally, and here's what's really not fair. When I open up my phone or I turn on at least one channel, I see them getting debit cards, cash, clothing, cell phones, New York City hotel rooms for months on end, and the greatest affront, your kid's seat in a Bronx classroom, a New York City classroom. And people say, that's not fair. You're a racist. Excuse me, I'm a 32-year-old African-American male who now has to compete for the jobs I want in my community. You're a xenophobe. No, I'm a Hispanic, I'm a Latina grandmother who's 64 and got here 35 years ago, and I have 4 grandchildren in that school in the Bronx where you want to pluck them out and put illegal immigrants' kids. So people saw it firsthand, and all of a sudden they're more aligned. That's number one. Number two, quickly, he's got a better relationship with the Hill. And this has nothing to do with whoever was there. That part doesn't matter to me. In 2017, 8 years ago in Trump 1.0, when we were there, we tricked ourselves. With a 40-plus Republican seat majority in the House, it just seems like you can get so much done. You can lose 10 votes and still make it. You can lose a whole constituency and still get something passed. But the opposite happened. With that much fat in the system, it just gave air and water to factionalization. It created a lot of factionalization, and so we did lose many votes. Now, this time, it's very unusual. President Trump's more comfortable with what the executive branch's relationship is and the execution of the laws that they make, and then, of course, the judiciary. But I say this because now we have a very slim margin. But there's something very clarifying about this slim margin. And the best example I have for you to explain how different it is for him now to have that relationship on the Hill occurred on January 3rd of this year. 17 days before he was inaugurated himself, they had the swearing into the House and Senate. I'm sure you remember this. It was a Friday. And President Trump was in West Palm Beach. He was interviewing people for his team, playing a little golf. And he was getting calls that Mike Johnson was not safe to be reelected. So he said, I'm going to find out what's going on. So he started making some calls. People were calling him. And he would say to the holdouts, why are you a holdout? Now, what he didn't say was, I'm going to primary you into oblivion. You will never work in this town again. Your congressional career is over. He just said, what's the holdup? Why are you a holdout? Some people, of course, had no good answer because they just like going on MSNBC to tell you why they're a holdout. Others had very good answers. Others said any variation to him of, we need time to read the bill. And ladies and gentlemen, we can't be hypocrites. We can't be the people mocking correctly Nancy Pelosi for saying we must pass the bill to see what's in it, and then not give our own folks time to read the bill. These are reasonable, requests. They worked it all out. Mike Johnson got reelected. And I'm saying that just because it was the first evidence of carrot over stick for people who otherwise think that President Trump is all stick. So I think just the unity that you're forced to have because your margin is so slim. It's a nail biter, believe me. We didn't get reconciliation passed yet and need to. That's the most important thing going on. Please call your members. The most important thing happening is dereg and tax cuts, in my humble view. So that's two things. One is America's more aligned with America First. Two, his relationship with the Hill. And third, it's really the interaction with and the engagement of corporate America. And I'm telling you that as an entrepreneur talking to entrepreneurs, and we all love entrepreneurs. But when I say corporate America, I mean other CEOs like him. At this point, 8 years ago when Trump won, we probably had 15 or 20 who wanted to visit us. I'm probably triple counting to make myself feel better and impress you. It really wasn't 20, but it's now hundreds. And the White House they simply cannot service the demand for the president's time one-on-ones with the CEOs. So he's telling baby tech, little tech like HP, Intel, IBM, Dell, Qualcomm, come in together. I want all these competitors in together because I want to hear what's going on in their industry and how I can help. And I also want to hear what they're doing to shrink their Chinese footprint and increase their American investment. He had Target and Walmart and Home Depot and another big retailer in there last week. And I think they really broke through on tariffs. I think they did. But first thing I told them was mention small businesses. Who's your top customer? Probably small businesses. Like my aunt and uncle, caterers for many years, they went to Costco and BJ's and loaded up and then made their own recipes from discounted items. This is a very common story. But I think his relationship with the CEOs is the reason that's better now is not to have a bunch of CEO bros running around. It's better just so they can say, this is what's going on. This is what our customers are saying. This is what I'm hearing from the supply chain, my distributors, my suppliers, my manufacturers, my C-suite, my financiers. Very important for him to be able to face people who aren't enraged, but actually engaged. So I think that's different. Also, he understands the power of the executive order. He did plenty the first time, but this time they just had them prepared. He's thought for 4 years. And the last thing I'll say is, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think any of us can truly understand and appreciate how big of a second chance President Trump is just giving. I believe in America. I believe in second chances. I do, and I'm a devout Catholic, so I definitely believe in God's mercy and redemption and second chances. I've never seen quite as big a second chance as that one. And when you thought about this for 4 years, and your enemies, which were growing by the day, are promising, not predicting, not willing, promising their audiences, promising their donors, that guy will never again be near the White House. In fact, he'll be in the big house. And you're hearing that. A year ago right now, Donald Trump was in court. And he wasn't an indoor cat, as you noticed. But he was in the courtroom every day. And they promised he would never again be next to that resident desk. So when you get there, you're ready to go. And I think there's just much more prepared this time.
I think those are some great observations. We just see a lot of differences this term. So I appreciate those answers. I would be remiss not to spend just a couple minutes on what we call education freedom. And I know you've been talking about this too. As our panel tomorrow will discuss it in great detail, we see an education freedom revolution happening across this country. Dozens of states have passed universal education freedom, and it is empowering parents to help their children escape failing schools and pursue the good educations that they need and deserve. From a messaging and policy perspective, why do you think conservatives have finally broken through on this topic that is truly the civil rights issue of our time?
Well, I'm so glad you're asking me this question. It is exactly that. I think what's broken through is just our stick-with-itness, not giving up, and just keep on elevating education to the top. And then we got a big boost, sadly, from COVID. You know, for years, decades, the Democrats always score by double digits in advantage over Republicans on the polling question. Which party do you trust more to handle education? Which party do you trust more to handle healthcare? Democrats always beating us by double digits in nationwide polls. Now, Republicans and Democrats are at parity on education, and sometimes we're actually winning by a point or two, but it's within the margin of error one way or the other. The same is not true of healthcare. Another hobby horse of mine is like, what are we afraid of? And if you want to reach women, stop shrinking and pinking it. It's stop talking about abortion, unless of course you're pro-life, but stop talking about stop saying these ridiculous things to us. We're the chief healthcare officers of our households. We control 2 out of every 3 healthcare dollars spent. Same thing on education. What happened with education is that we had a parents' rights renaissance in the middle of COVID. We had kitchen islands as classrooms, screen time as school time. And let me just say, because there's a big class difference in this country, the biggest demarcation that we don't talk enough about in our polling among the electorate is college-educated versus non-college educated households. But that was crystallized in sharp relief during COVID, because as a lot of rich white liberal people were home, very nice homes, with their kids on very nice computers, learning a very nice curriculum from the very nice private schools, which describes all of my kids and my family. These women were home with their kids while their husbands were out still working. They're in the 23 essential categories. They're picking up our garbage. They're preparing our food. They're driving our trucks. They work in the hospitals, and not as surgeons and nurses. And she's home with these kids, and she's listening to what they're learning. It was a big shock for people. And then, of course, we were all told, because this is part of why I left the White House on September 4th of 2020. I went in and told the president on Sunday night. These person in D.C., Maryland, where my kids were going to school, said the kids are going to have to start online again in the second school year, even though that summer people were out and about. That summer people had a good summer, and not everybody is Governor Brian Kemp and opening the state faster than other places. Yeah, absolutely. And we had our eye on Governor Kemp. I had my eye on Governor Kemp the whole time and he was on the phone with the president. This is why we're doing it. These are the categories, soft reopening. But he helped so many students. Just think about the kids. What are we doing to these kids who have a .000? So this education, parents' rights renaissance started during COVID. But then it quickly metastasized in the Virginia election of Glenn Youngkin over Terry McAuliffe. On that issue, among others. He's been a great governor, so it's lots of issues. But that issue was the one top of the list when McAuliffe said what he said. And Governor Youngkin, to his enormous credit, did what governors should do. He put his own political capital on the line after he was elected to try to get school choice passed, to try to get more folks. He came up short, but he did the right thing. And I think it's the stick-with-itness, and it's just, like I said about the America First agenda earlier, more people started realizing, I need an alternative to this school. And it's also, at the same time, the Democrats started going crazy with what was being taught there in the curriculum and everything. Let me say this. 60 years after a lot of bigoted Democrats stood in the schoolhouse door refusing to let kids of color into the schools, we have Democrats all across this country, and every single one of them in Washington, every single one, standing in the schoolhouse door, refusing that kids of all backgrounds to exit that failing school and to let that money we're all going to pay anyway, and I would say should, that money we're going to pay anyway, to follow that child, to empower those parents with their very first obligation, their deepest love, and their greatest responsibility, which is how to educate their children. And I can't find a Democrat, back in the day when I was starting to go to Grover's meetings, and he was my landlord 30 years ago. 30 years ago this summer. Thank you, Grover. 30 years ago this summer, Grover had the school choice people at his meetings every week. That's how I learned about it. And they were in the States, and then there was Prop 178 in California, etc. But it's sticking with it. But I got this to say to you. In 1999, right before Al Gore, right after he invented the internet, and right before he ran for president and chose Joe Lieberman, Democratic senator from Connecticut, as his running mate. Joe Lieberman, Senator Lieberman, a guy named Reverend Floyd Flake, was a pastor, black pastor in New York City, of his church, and also a congressman. I did a press conference. Myself and a quote Democratic pollster did a press conference in the swamp outside of the Capitol with Democratic Senator Joe Lieberman and with Floyd Flake, and we talked about opportunity scholarships for Washington D.C. and we talked about talked about school choice. We had Democrats in favor of this. Ladies and gentlemen, as the number of kids who need an alternative has increased, the number of Democrats who will even talk about this has decreased. To the point where, today I just got a briefing from somebody up on Capitol Hill, because I want the ECCA in reconciliation. Forget what I want, who cares? President Trump told them, get the ECCA in reconciliation. He had a roundtable discussion on education 9 days into his presidency. I was there. He invited some governors, he invited some parents, and he said, I want that in reconciliation. I called today, and I said, is it going to make it? Because we're always like the bridesmaid, we're always the stepchild, but we're going to make it. And I got a very good report that the Educational Choice for Children Act, it's alive, and it's going to be included by either the House or Senate as part of the budget. And the reason that they feel more hopeful doing it now than any other time is because they know it has to be in a, quote, partisan bill. If it's going to be something that's bipartisan, Democrats will walk if you dare put educational freedom in there. And this is going to be a partisan bill because we can't, for some reason, get Democrats, including the 17 that were elected in congressional districts where Donald Trump also won. We can't get them to say, you know what, I don't like Donald Trump, I'm not going to vote for him. I didn't like the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. I didn't vote for it last time I wasn't in Congress. But it has worked for the small businesses, the moms and pops, the mothers and fathers, the people of my district or my state. If I'm a senator, I'm going to do what's right for them. Last point on this. I want to drill it home. I am 1,000% pro-life. I absolutely understand why people are pro-choice, including people in my own family who I love dearly. I'm 1,000% for the Second Amendment. I understand why some people, when there's a school shooting, say, do something, do something, do something. I have to acknowledge that and appreciate it, even if then I want to talk to them about it. I will never, ever, ever understand, acknowledge, accept, abide how we have an entire political party that is against educational freedom, against giving these kids the chance that they deserve. And that's where we are now. They have made it a partisan issue. Now is our moment. This is the time. The ECCA it's the most significant one-time piece of legislation ever passed in any major committee. It passed last fall when Biden was still president, or someone last fall, out of Ways and Means. I like to say, of course he's the president, and then you say all the damage he's doing. But anyway, she was no more impressive, by the way. She had weakness of a different kind, but weakness is weakness.
Thank you. Education is one of the great equalizers in life, of course. Last question before we take a few audience questions, and that is to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill. JCN and our members have been widely credited with helping to get the TCJA over the finish line. President Trump has previously noted that, and I quote, without JCN, we wouldn't have gotten the tremendous tax cut that made our country roar, end quote. From your perspective, how's that fight going to expand and make it permanent?
Great question. Let me take this moment to say that is all 100% fact-checked and true. You were so incredibly instrumental and essential the first time, are again this time. And I don't even know if we painted a full picture for America of what life would be like if this weren't to be extended, if not expanded. If something that we've been living with for 7.5 years now, 7+ years, if that went away. It's so much difficult for any of us to lose something we've had than to never have it in the first place. And this, when we talk about, I think what JCN has done so well is show the nexus between the work you did to fight to get it over the finish line, getting it over the finish line, and then its implementation. So much of what the media and other Democrats said was going to happen with the first Tax Cut and Jobs Act never happened. They said, I was on TV 5 times a day about this from the North on, the C-suite's just going to stick the cash in their pockets. Excuse me, they invested in their employees. They raised the wages. They improved the benefits and the health benefits, the retirement benefits they were offering. They put the money into innovation, inventory, research, development, facilities, factories. We had 100 corporate incursions before you helped to pass that bill. And then we had none after that under Trump. We had trillions of dollars legally parked overseas and a lot of jobs with it. And it's about half or more of that, 60% and more of that was repatriated. To have the corporate tax rate go from 35%, you did this, 35%, the highest in the OECD, to 21% lower than the average then of 23%, was just remarkable. And to some of the other stuff, keeping some of those other deductions and whatnot, and the argument over SALT at the time, and the argument over the child tax credit, I was there for all of that. But the most important thing is here in Georgia, in around September 20th, mid to late September, this tells the tale. President Trump was doing a town hall on manufacturing here in Georgia. I just so happened to be watching it, sitting on the set at Fox and comment on it. I just so happened to have a long scheduled speech to National Association of Manufacturing that day. So here's President Trump in Georgia, and he says, I'm here to have a manufacturing town hall. Here's how we're going to bring manufacturing back. Talked a lot about expensing, talked a lot about tax cuts. He was flanked by 2 banners. Made in the USA, 15% corporate tax cut. And my phone's blowing up. People are calling me, texting me. It's like, how do I get me some of that 15% tax rate? And I said, refer to banner A. Made in the USA. And that is what's going on here. And this TCJA would be important anyway. The dereg would be incredibly important. The energy, not just independence and production, but dominance would be incredibly important. The smaller federal government footprint through DOGE or other spending measures or for some other way, whatever it ends up looking like, would be important. But they're all important because with the tariffs on now, all of that needs to be priced into the tariffs. And the difficulty for some people, particularly small businesses, has been that the tariffs came first. And you want me to price in things that I don't yet have access to. I don't yet exist as much as the tariffs do. So it's important in many ways. It'd be nice to have a couple Democrats. But if you weren't here, if JCN had disappeared or winnowed or said, well, someone else will do that, or we did our job, we're not going to engage in this fight, we're on to other issues, or we're mad about X, Y, and Z, or we wish that you were doing A, B, and C first. Does this all sound familiar to all of us? Yes. If any of us said that and picked up our arms and went a different way, this wouldn't be happening. Because I'm worried every day about this. It's these slim margins, a lot going on, and frankly, the president said we're not touching Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. And if you take the mandatory spending and you add just the interest that we owe on our debt, that's 100% of our revenue. And so he's got measures in there like no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, campaign promises, helps a lot of great people. They're not growth measures. So again, there are other ways I think that we have to consider having growth measures in there, but making them permanent and recognizing that. I think the big, beautiful bill, the big part is because some folks are adding stuff in. And I have confidence from what I know, and I don't pretend to know anything more than you know, because you're JCN, and Governor Kemp can tell us what he knows, and that would be the best. But seriously speaking, they get this passed. Now they're saying signed by Independence Day. That would be incredible. September would be awesome. But people really need this relief now because the sunsetting would have been bad, but even in the era of tariffs and a little bit of uncertainty around that, this is imperative.
I couldn't agree more. Well, we have just a couple minutes that we can get a couple of audience questions. I know I have Tony and Lauren out there in the audience. I cannot see as well, so you ladies are going to have to help me.
Hi. Serious question for you with regard to the first 100 days. And I would like to get your thoughts when you look at approval ratings. And please don't do the whole thing, we don't trust the polls. Rasmussen's pretty respected. But the lowest popularity rating since Eisenhower in '52 when they've been doing it, and the only one comparably low was the one he had the first time around. So what I want to know is, what do you think that tells us about the American people's thoughts on what's taking place, and what does it portend?
Thanks for the question. I'm not going to poo-poo polls, since I am Kellyanne Polls on Twitter, and I've had my own polling firms for decades now, and accurately predicted in writing, because I know everybody else said they knew, the election outcome, all 7 states. I called it the narrow landslide. Trump was going to have a narrow landslide, win all 7 swing states. And a guy in my firm said he's going to win the popular vote. I'm like, really? He got a big bonus. So in any event, so I'm not going to do that, but I am going to tell you something about approval ratings that I've been saying for decades. So I'm not saying it tonight, and I'm not saying it because Donald Trump's president. Approval ratings and favorability ratings are very distorting because we don't know why they said that. And Donald Trump's approval ratings are always going to be lower than the country's approval for what he's doing. Barack Obama's approval ratings are always going to be higher than America's approval for what he's doing. So that is a very personal thing to each of them and a lot of other folks. I will tell you that when you get granular and you ask people what they like and didn't like so far, which is the better way of doing polling, if you just say, the president said this, the president did that, the president signed an executive order, you just give facts. And I'm a fully recovered attorney, but I was a pollster, then an attorney, then a pollster, so I like to footnote the actual fact in the polling question. Curiously, what people like, that big poll we just did, what they like most about the first 100 days has a lot to do with national security and foreign policy. China Belt Initiative, trying to negotiate a peace in Ukraine with Russia and Ukraine, Middle East stuff, bringing hostages home, pushing back on Iran, saying, oh gee, what 31 Democrats in the House could not say in a very simple resolution on October 18, 2023, 11 days after the massacre in Israel, that Houthis and Hamas are terrorist groups. So he's doing things like this. People like that. Where they're less certain right now is on the economy, because we're sitting in his rebuild as the 100 days is happening. And this is not, a presidency is not and should never be on an egg timer. This is not Uber Eats with my teenagers waiting the door. This is not a DoorDash. This is not the Uber picking you up in 2 minutes. This is taking decades of globalization and being taken advantage of and saying, I'm going to try it a different way. Because everybody tells me that what I was saying about Japan, and I'm being Donald Trump now, what I was saying about Japan in 1980, we're saying about China now. And they're the number 2 superpower. They got nowhere to go but up, and boy, are they on the march trying to make it so. And if it's not through steel and aluminum and AI and forced technology transfers and trade, then it's going to be some other way. So I don't think he should. I also, just so we're clear, sir, when his approval rating was 52% his first week in office, I didn't make much of that either. That's just euphoria for getting rid of a president that looked and talked like a wax figure. Everybody was done with that. So we're glad Trump came in. And nobody wanted Harris. And so, I do trust the polls if they're done properly, but I don't have a lot of great feeling about approval ratings and favorability ratings for the same reason on education. If you asked a poll question that said, do you support or oppose protecting the environment? Do you support or oppose improving the quality, do you support or oppose spending more on education? And, it's going to be 80%. Protecting the environment, it's like 85%. Do you support making sure poor kids have enough to eat? It says 93%. I'm like, well, who the hell are the other 7%? Excuse my French. Like, what is this polling question? I think that those are not very good questions. The specific questions tell you the granularity. And I have this to say, America has this love affair with change and choice and options and new things, and I'm a revolutionary, I'm an independent thinker, I'm a this, I'm a that. They voted for disruption and change. And maybe this is not, maybe they really weren't ready for that, some of them. Or maybe they should just wait till it's accomplished. We have to be patient. These things take time. And we'll see where it goes. I think the president is taking a lot of risks, as everyone in this room has. You would not be in this room if you weren't smart people, accomplished risk takers who peek around corners and are willing to defy the critics and the naysayers in your own homes, in your own places of work and worship, in your own circle of life. It's going to take a while, but this country says, I want change, I want revolution, I want transformation, and then we go to McDonald's and Chick-fil-A every night in order number 3. So it's a big test as to how much change we really want.
Do I have another question out there?
Sir.
Thank you so much for your presentation and insights to all of the things that we are interested in. President Trump has talked about taking the income tax to a different level, reducing or taking it away from tips, from Social Security, etc. There's been a movement out since 1999 to totally do away with the income tax and replace it with what's called the fair tax. I'd like to get your insight on what possibilities there are about doing away totally with income taxes and putting in place the fair tax.
Thank you. And one of the cool, we're talking about fair tax, sometimes known as consumption tax. We did a lot of work on this years ago for a group of anti-tax groups, obviously, business leaders, fair tax versus flat tax versus the current graduated taxes, graduated levels. And so people like the idea of that. I think that the anti-fair tax movement got a lot of juice early on, saying it was going to be regressive, it's going to hurt the poor, they need to spend their income on home heating fuel and gas for the car and certainly groceries for their family, etc. I wonder, though, since we know so much more now and since we see so much more and since we have what I call the democratization of information, anybody can pull up information at the same time, no matter who you are. I wonder if people wouldn't be more warm to at least the idea, because they have control over their consumption and their choices, and they're watching other people. So it is something that's been around at least 25 years that I know of. And while we're on the topic of income taxes, I mean, we need a better way than what we have now. Everybody knows that. While we're on the topic of taxes, though, I'm very happy that the president, not that long ago, maybe last week, came out and affirmatively said, we're not going to, quote, raise taxes on the wealthy. I can't believe that ever had a moment of oxygen, and it did. Unfortunately, and it did. And I was on Kudlow 2 weeks ago, and we just poo-pooed that. I was waiting for both of our phones to ring. I said, that is the worst idea I've heard in a very long time. You're going to hurt small businesses first and foremost. I said, we're 44% of the GDP. We're half of the workforce. We're almost 35 million strong. We employ 58 million. Sam, one of you. It's just a terrible idea. And the whole notion that it even got a moment's notice, let alone an extended moment's notice, is troublesome. But it also makes your point, Sarah, which is we're always looking for alternatives to what we have. These battleships turn so slowly, but if the country's in a disruptive, transformative mood, then I think putting alternatives on the table work.
Thank you for that question. We have time for one last question.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you for the question. I just wanted to know, in your opinion, what is the biggest messaging mistake Republicans are making right now that could potentially cost them in the upcoming elections?
That's a great question. That's a really good one. I got to pick one. There are sins of omission and there are sins of commission. There are things that we can say better, and then there are things we should stop ignoring. I think the biggest challenge for conservatives, for free market center right folks, and for the Republican Party right now, maybe even the White House, is always making sure you're finishing the sentence. So I look at 2022 as a great example. 2022, some of those pollsters that I guess you like predicted red wave, red tsunami. Everybody's winning. I watched them on TV and I go, everybody's winning. Tiffany Smiley, wonderful person, great education leader. Tiffany Smiley running against the decidedly non-smiley Patty Murray in Washington State for Senate. That would have been great. She's winning. She's down by 2. She's up. Everybody give her money. Okay, here we go. Well, she lost by 12 points. Tudor Dixon. I went up and campaigned for her. I'm sure we all did. Probably ran into the governor there. No, it's just she's got Gretchen Whitmer dead to rights. Loses by 10, 12, 14 points, whatever it is. Anyway, it went on and on and on. But you get paid very well if you tell people what they want to hear. And so this would be the messaging advice I'd give. Make sure we are telling America what they need to know, not what they want to hear. Now, those may be two in the same thing sometimes, but I think we're at a moment where you have to complete the sentence, because in 2022, here's what Republican candidates were saying. Biden, taxes, education, border. Those aren't sentences. Those are like barely words. That's like a word. And that was it. Everybody was playing it safe because they figured they'd win. It actually made Biden run for a second term, so it had that benefit. But I say this because if everybody's going to cherry pick the polling they like on the issues they care about, we end up with me as a 16-year-old girl in South Jersey many, many years ago. And every Saturday morning, my girlfriends and I would pile into a car or two, and we'd go to Christine's house. Why? Well, we go and have a big breakfast and then go to the football game, certainly. But why? We went to Christine's house and no one else's house, because Christine's scale had us 3 to 4 pounds lighter than we actually were. We'd all get in there and weigh. We probably weighed nothing. We all got in there and get weighed, and then we had a big breakfast. Now, we knew the scale was 3 or 4 pounds wrong, but we loved looking at that number. And that's what I would say to answer your question. If we're looking at polling numbers, just say, do you support or oppose X? It doesn't finish the sentence. Give tension in the questions and give tension in the responses, the way we live our lives. So I'm sure you have more than just that dress. I've never been in your closet, but I have a feeling nobody held that up in your household today. Your husband didn't say, support or oppose, approve or disapprove. No. You chose it, whether you realize you chose it or not. You're like, this is my lucky JCN gala dress. Or I look smoking hot, which would be true. I'm allowed to say it. We're all allowed to say it now again, which is nice. Whatever reason, it was in the dry cleaning bag, it's the passion, whatever it is you choose. We cannot just leave to chance that people know what we're talking about. So if President Trump says, I got rid of DEI, and I got rid of, I think you have to say, look, we're all for small d, small e, small I, but what he really should say is, in life, what he really should say is, you know what? I'm for fairness. They're for equity. Equity is equality of outcomes. Fairness is equality of opportunity. And that's how I won. Fairness, don't have plumbers and pipe fitters paying for the student loans of doctors and lawyers. Don't have men and women's sports. Don't keep kids out of failing school, keep kids in failing schools, etc. And then strength over weakness, I think, is the other reason he wanted. We keep showing strength, and I think the strength right now is what's rankling some people. They're saying, well, I didn't want it this fast, or I didn't want it that strong. Well, the word strength includes the word strong. I didn't want it that strengthy. So I think that's one of it. The other thing I would say is the sin of omission. I'm going to say it again. The fact that we don't talk about healthcare is ridiculous. It took a global pandemic for us to bridge that polling deficit, which part of you trust more on education. It took a global pandemic for us to do better on that. I wish I could tell you I'm a genius and everybody listened to me, and that's how it happened. It was COVID. So why are we waiting for something like that, God forbid, to get us at parity with healthcare? The Democrats do not deserve to be seen as the party that's good on healthcare. And I'm not saying government-run healthcare. That's what they're for. We should be out there every day talking about this. And I'm glad this administration is doing more of it in terms of outcomes. But I think the sin of commission that we keep ignoring, and it came back to bite us. The Inflation Reduction Act was a $237 billion loss to Medicare. That money, it didn't reduce inflation. The money went to PBMs and migrant care. That's a fact. Did not go to seniors, did not go to inflation reduction. So That's a long answer for you because I have so many. But the sin of commission is healthcare, mark my word. And then it allows the left to say women's health, and then it allows them to say healthcare, women's health, women's intimate health, rural health. We need to nip that in the bud and just do a better job of it.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
thank
very
you
much
for that
for having
question.
me.
Thank
God
you all
bless you,
very much.
JCN. Thank you for all of your work.